Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, talk a lot about the NFL Draft, which is just about an hour away. Of course, the New Orleans Saints. We'll talk about the local teams, the players they're sending to this year's draft, and we got a great panel to break it down for you tonight. 37 years of Al Dupuy's Draft Day Report, and of course, you can check that out. I'm not sure how many of these publications Al has left, but it's a great publication. We'll keep up what's going on with the NFL Draft. And Ryan Fitzgerald, Senior Bowl scout, is also with us tonight. And looking forward to having both these guys kind of break down the draft for you as we get ready. Hoping the Saints are going to be able to garner some riches over the next 3 days. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. I always like to let folks know a little bit about what you're involved in before we kick it off. And I kind of stole your thunder a little bit there, Al. 37
right.
years of
that's
Draft
pretty
Day
involved.
Report. That's a long time. And
yeah.
you and I have been doing interviews on the radio for a long time now. And I always marvel at the fact that, how much time you put into this publication.
A lot of time. And this year was one of the hardest ones, I think, because they have a lot of players this year with red flags, and you get a mock draft going, and you find out something happened to this guy or that guy, and you kind of redo it. It's been one of the harder ones, I think, but I enjoy doing it.
And you do a great job with it. And, of course, Ryan Fitzgerald is with us from the Senior Bowl, and happy to have you. And, Ryan, tell folks a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks, sir. So this is my entering my third year now with the Senior Bowl, and live locally here. Been down in New Orleans, live here now for the past 7 years, and got in touch a couple years back, writing a bunch of letters trying to break through, and one of them that I wrote was to Phil Savage, our director of the Senior Bowl. A great guy, lived in Mobile, Alabama, and called me back and drove up to Mobile, Alabama, and sat and had a couple-hour lunch with them, and put me on the road as his road scout in this area. So I kind of have the state of Louisiana, and out to Houston as far as Texas, up to Mississippi State, and then obviously the week of the Senior Bowl, the combine I went to this year, and pro days in the area. So. It's been great. Every year you learn something. I mean, every day, technically. I mean, every week. So everything's something different, and it's been a great process.
Well, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Certainly appreciate it. Let's start off before we get into the draft. Let's talk about a little bit of Adrian Peterson. Mm-hmm. And I've talked about it on the radio show over the last couple of days, and of course tonight, Adrian Peterson signs a 2-year, $7 million deal. It can be up to about $8.2 million with incentives and escalators. It's about really a $3.5 million one-year deal because the second year is voidable.
Right.
Al, I'll start with you first. Your thoughts on this? Is this a good thing considering the depth of the draft at the running back position? Do you think that when you look at Adrian Peterson, that he's going to be able to coexist with Mark Ingram? Why don't you take it first?
Well, I think it's a good deal because of the money they paid him. I don't think they didn't break the bank. And I think what they're looking for, Eric, is a guy that can replace Hightower. And if he can do what Hightower did backing up Ingram, I think that would be a great, hire for the Saints. Hightower gained about 550 yards last year, which is about half of what Ingram did. And so you need a backup. I think Ingram will be fine with him, playing with him. I know they had that incident last year on the sidelines and all of that, but I think that was primarily because he brought the team all the way down to the goal line, and then they let Hightower score.
Right.
So he got a little upset. But he came out of that pretty quickly. And I think Ingram's a team-type guy, and he had probably his best year last year. So I think it's a good pick for the money, but you don't know until you get him on the field and see how that knee is, if it's going to hold up. I mean, he only played in 3 games last year, but the year before, I think he had like 1,500 yards, something in that neighborhood. So if he can do half of what Ingram did, back him up, spell Ingram, and do like Hightower. Now, he's not a really good receiver out of the backfield, but they're probably going to have Cadet, and I got a feeling late in the draft, they'll get a third down type of a back that can do that as well. So it's not, even though they picked up Peterson, that doesn't mean that somewhere in the draft that they may take another running back.
And of course, they have Lasko and Murphy on the roster as well.
Lasko, I thought Lasko would probably be the backup before the Peterson thing, because I think he's a pretty good back. He got nicked last year, and it hurt him, but he can run between the tackles. He's got enough speed to bounce outside. So, yeah, I look for Lasko to get quite a bit of playing time as well.
Ryan, your opinion on the signing of Adrian Peterson?
Yeah, I agree as far as, the way you structure the contract and everything, so if you can get a lot of that incentive based or upfront and everything, dependent, I think he's going to be hungry. And, there's guys that are kind of, you can't really replace. And when a guy like Adrian Peterson, as far as he's obviously in a world of his own. Guys that are doing 30-some inch plyometric jumps with holding 60-pound dumbbells, after everything he's been through. And all the miles that he's put on those tires, and you get him with a Drew Brees, and he gets a little bit of a second life. He gets hungry. He's got something to prove. It's, playing with a chip on your shoulder and going for that. He doesn't have any rings. So I mean, he's getting up there. He's going to be chasing it as well. I think sometimes you see those guys come from a team for a while and get that extra burst, and I think it'd be a real well help. Not a long-term fix, obviously, but
So it's a short-term deal. I mean, looking at what it'd be 33 by the time the season starts, I believe. Obviously, coming off an ACL injury, I think he's played about half of the games that he could have participated in over the last couple seasons. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I want to see how they're going to coexist. Yeah. Peterson's always been a guy that's gotten fed and has gotten the ball 20, 25 times, 30 times at some point. Now if you look at the stats of Hightower, 5 carries, 10 carries, 12 carries. Yeah. Can he coexist with Ingram getting those type of carries? And he's always seen the type of back that gets better the number of carries he gets. Sure. And can he be as proficient as he's been in the past with the limited amount of touches that he's going to get in this offense, unless Ingram gets injured. And then you have a guy that maybe you can lean on that can carry the load for you. So again, them being able to coexist, I think, will be an interesting dynamic going into camp and into the season.
That's a good point. I think, Ingram, too, I find he gets better with more carries.
Oh, yeah. And it depends on what you want at this stage in your career. What's more important to you, the winning and getting that title, or the carries and the yards? I think Peterson's past that. Yeah. That the yards and the carries. I think he wants to win.
At his age, I think he'll accept the fewer carries.
And Ryan, I like what you had to say as well. If he shows that he is back and that he still has some tread on the tire, it doesn't necessarily have to be with the New Orleans Saints the following season. He may have an opportunity to go to a team that maybe has a better chance of getting a title. Yeah. But I do like some of the things that he said. Of course, his proximity to Texas, where his family is, had a lot to do with that as well. I would have liked to have seen a younger back. I'm not going to say that. But, again, it'll be an interesting situation with the Saints. Something I was really glad to hear this week, considering having 5 picks in the first 103, is that the Saints have cooled, at least for the moment, on Malcolm Butler. All along I've said that when you're picking 10th, 11th, and 12th in the rounds in which you have a pick, with the exception of the 32nd pick that you've received from the Brandon Cooks deal from New England, you don't squander those picks. You don't give those picks away.
Right.
And if you get a second first rounder with the opportunity to have that 5-year option on a player, you want to hold on to that as well.
Sure.
So again, the Saints have said they're not willing to give up 32. They're not willing to give up 42, which probably means that more than likely either this deal will not get done or they'll start to take a look at draft choices next year, which again, for the Saints, I think is a good move on their part, because obviously you think you're going to be better than 7 and 9. You're going to be better than picking in the top 10, top 12 in every round going forward. They had the parameters of the deal set up, from what we understand, about $50 million over the life of the contract that would have been paid by Butler if ultimately they could have made the trade. But I'm really glad to see that they've kind of held back on this, and they're going to utilize these draft choices. Your thoughts?
I've been for that all along. When it first broke, I said no. Just draft. You got all these picks. They traded Brandon Cooks. Why? To build a defense, to accumulate draft picks. So now you're going to go trade him. I mean, look, he's a good football player, but keep your draft picks, draft right. That's what Atlanta's done the last couple of years, and look where they came from and where they are now. So, of course, you have to draft right. You know,
true.
If you draft right, and I think that's the way to go. I've always felt and hoped that this deal would kind of fall through, and I'm pretty sure now they're cooled on it, but you never know what can happen on draft day. But I've always been in the ballpark of keeping your picks.
Yes.
Yeah, two things I would say about that is, one, this defensive back class too is outstanding.
Right.
That you can get. There's going to be some starters in the second, third round, especially when 70% of the time the league is playing nickel. So you're going to need some extra picks. Also, thing to consider too is who you're trading with. The Patriots. I thought about this the other day, and when they let go of some guy, can you name a guy that they let go of and he goes on to the next team and he does better than he did when he was with the Patriots? They're very good at getting every last ounce out of you, and right when you hit that max, let you go. There's not a lot of guys that leave New England and go on and do better in their other team.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that Butler's that guy, but I'm just saying that usually when something like that happens, unless you're in a desperate need, it was a bad class. But this defensive back class is so deep that, like you said, those 5 picks and 103. Sure. I don't really think you got to reach and/or pay $50 million for it.
And New England smells desperation, don't they?
Yeah, I mean,
they really do.
Yeah, they're hurting. They're hurting. It's been a while.
They know a team is desperate. Believe me, they smell desperation.
Yeah, I don't even like to deal with Belichick.
Most of the time, you're coming in on the short end of the deal. And the Saints have said this week that they're confident that they feel they're going to be able to have a draft similar to what they had last season. They pointed to the fact that they've turned the scouting department over, that they've turned the front office over. There's only a couple holdovers in the front office. They've turned the coaching staff over, which we saw a dramatic change in this coaching staff this past season. And again, they're looking at this through again, a different lens, with Jeff Ireland kind of leading the way on the college scouting side. Ryan, I'll take you first. Are you seeing that with the New Orleans Saints? Are you buying into what they're selling right now, that even though Sean Payton's there, Mickey Loomis there, there's really a new organization under them?
Yeah, and that kind of all going back to with Peterson and everything. That's kind of that a signing like that kind of shows you hey, we're going for it now kind of type deal, and we're kind of going after it, and we got to really lock and load on this thing, because you keep on going 7 and 9 for how many years? It's gonna catch up to you. So signing with Peterson, and then making that trade and getting more pick, like Brandon Cooks leaving, and hey, we got to really do something with this defense, and it's obviously a very, very strong defensive class. I think they're going for it. We got five choices and 103. You can't ask for much better than that. So I really think that if they get aggressive here, this will be a great year for it.
You've covered a lot of Saints coaching staffs, coaching front offices. Are you buying what Payton and Loomis is selling?
The thing I really like, I think, bringing in Mike Nolan. I think, Stephon Anthony, first-round pick last year, and the read on him from what I'm hearing is the guy can, and Payton even says, the guy's a great athlete, he can run. He leads the team in tackles just about every time he plays, but the problem is some of the tackles may be 2 or 3 yards downfield.
Yes.
Yeah. So the word is that diagnosing the play has been his problem. Right. And I think Mike Nolan, if he can take this kid and teach him, and I think it is something that you can learn to recognize quick whether is this going to be a pass play or a run play. They say that's what his problem is. He's recognizing a pass play for a run play and vice versa. So consequently, he's making the tackle late, and he's dropping into coverage late if he doesn't read the play properly. So hopefully, if that's his biggest problem, and Mike Nolan, who's a heck of a linebacker coach, was a former head coach, can correct some of that. I mean, even the game he played in last year before he got hurt and all, that game he led the team in tackles. I mean,
the key is leading the team in tackles for loss, cut, not necessarily 16 yards downfield.
That's right.
You got
should
20
be making the tackle
before the
at the goal line or for loss
instead
of maybe 3 yards downfield, 5 yards. But I think that has to do what I just said, with diagnosing the play quicker, better instincts.
Ryan, what are your thoughts on Stephon Anthony? He's been mentioned in trade talks, out there as possibly packaging picks and moving. Saints are ready to move on. They've added a lot of linebackers in this offseason, hoping that maybe they can hit on a few that'll be able to help them. I would hate to give up on a kid that was a first-round pick with all the raw talent he has. And, sometimes it takes a while for guys to be able to get it. I know that Al remembers Mark Fields when he was here in New Orleans. Mark Fields was the same type of scenario. Incredible athlete, just couldn't mentally get the game down. He goes to St. Louis. All of a sudden, he understands the mental part of the NFL, and the guy was a Pro Bowler. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, being in this area last year, I covered obviously LSU and everything. So one of my areas that I covered was Deion Jones last year, and obviously he's a one-year starter. But week 3, you see him. The first time I see him last year is against Auburn at home. The game where Fournette went off on everybody. And I remember saying to Phil, he's raw, takes some bad angles from time to time, but one thing that's hard to teach, everything from a linebacker's point of view, is he sees it and goes. He shoots that backside gap on 3rd and 1 and they're off the field. He might take a bad angle and get caught up in the wash on the next play, but at least he's getting it off the field. And he's aggressive, and he sees it and he goes, and his instincts, and he very, very little hesitation, he just goes. Stephon Anthony, I think, like you're saying, kind of overthinking a little bit too, but you gotta go. And you need it right now. There's a big difference of being there and arriving or being on the way. And especially at this level of the NFL, it's so fast that I mean, so I feel like he's going to really have to make that adjustment and be aggressive and shoot it and go and everything. Like you said, you have 10 tackles. You have 10 tackles, but 9 of them are after the 3rd and 13, and you tackle them 15 yards downfield. It doesn't do a whole lot. It looks good in the stat book, but you got to get those tackles for loss and set the tone early at the line of scrimmage.
Guys, I lay that on the coaching staff a little bit though, because again, 2 defensive coordinators in 2 years, different schemes, making him play the middle linebacker position, where now he's got to call the plays. He's not using his instincts to see what's happening with the play. He's having to get guys in position to be able to go forward on whatever they're calling, and ultimately slowed him down as well. I've often said, man, I don't know how you can't turn this guy loose on the edge and say go get the quarterback if nothing else. But some have mentioned he's had problems with special teams as well, and that's troubling when you can't just run down, stay in your lanes, and make a play on special teams. That's a red flag. And speaking of red flags, let's talk about some red flags right now, because obviously last week we found out Reuben Foster had a diluted test sample, which puts him automatically in the NFL substance abuse program. He's going to be tested weekly within the NFL, so he has little or no wiggle room. This week we found out Jabril Peppers also had a diluted sample as well. Again, same situation there. We've got Jerron Conley, the cornerback out of Ohio State, who now has been accused of raping a woman in a Cleveland hotel bathroom. He has not been charged. He has not been, from what I understand, not even been interviewed by police yet up to this point. And ultimately, again, there's a he said, she said type of situation with the individuals that were in that hotel room. Some say it was consensual. Some say nothing happened. So, again, that's got to hurt his draft stock, a la Lyle Collins. And you saw the dramatic fall where he was as well. Al, you've got a list of guys with red flags, and we were talking before, and Ryan, you concurred. I want to get you guys' thoughts on this. Maybe this year, when you start talking about the top athletes more than we've seen,
the highly rated
in previous drafts.
Yeah, I think so. Sidney Jones, one of the top cornerbacks, would have been probably a top 15 at worst pick. Tore up a knee. He's out. Joe Mixon. You heard the story on Joe Mixon. And, of course, this happened when he was 18 years old, and he punched a woman in the face, which you can't do that. You can't hit a woman. But, he's a heck of a player, and he will get drafted. Probably would have been a first-round pick. I think he only slides maybe to round 2. I'm sure there's several teams that took him off the board. And we asked at the press conference today yesterday with Mickey Loomis, if Joe Mixon or anybody else is off the board, and he wouldn't say, of course, names, but he did say that there are some players that are off the board, and teams take players off the board for several reasons. This guy Brantley, from a defensive tackle from Florida, another domestic violence, punched a woman. It's unreal. Then you got Jake Butt, a tight end, one of the better tight ends from Michigan, tore up
great guy too.
A knee. Fabian Moreau, a torn pec, another highly rated cornerback. So you can go down the list. You mentioned, and McKinney, UCLA, one of the better pass rushers in this draft, and I see him still rated in the top in the first round by a lot of mock drafts.
He's supposed to come to our Senior Bowl, but
the guy is a heck of a player, but the injury he had, I understand it may be a 6-month rehab. You don't know if this guy's going to be ready for the first real game of the season. So do you take a guy like that in the first round? He's going to miss training camp. He's going to miss the OTAs, all of that. I don't know.
So these are talented guys that would have went in the first round that now may be dropping to the second or third or beyond simply because of either red flags on the medical or character.
The thing is that, either character or, medical problems. And I think, some of them are still going to go, I think, fairly high. I don't look for Sidney Jones to drop past the second round, even though, he's got the injury.
Now, Jake Butt is way ahead of schedule as well. He's supposed to be ready for camp.
Why don't you take it, Ryan? Because you're intimately involved in this at the Senior Bowl when they're going through the interviews, and you guys are inviting these players, you're scouting these players, you're talking to the coaches, you're probably talking to the trainers, you're probably talking to the people that are involved just in the football program itself to kind of get a feel for what these players are about. Talk about the process that you deal with.
The process too. That's why when you see some of these mock drafts sometimes early and everything, that it's great. I know what people are doing, but I'll say this too, and I'll go. Phil's taught me this from the get. Your evaluation of somebody is not completely done until you've met them. Until you've met them and you talk to them and you interviewed them and you said, it's just like anything. If you run a construction company, a truck driving company, you got the best truck driver out there in the world, but he doesn't show up or he's not passing the drug test. It doesn't matter how good he is. So that is the characters is a huge part of it. And when you start looking at also one thing about the Joe Mixon thing too is how Oklahoma was saying they punished him for the 1 year and thing that you could actually in hindsight almost say now too that punishing him quote unquote for sitting out your redshirt year might actually help this draft. He's got 300, 400 less carries than Leonard Fournette does on his tire. He's got no injury. So showing up to the facility every day and not getting banged up, not getting hit, having 2 great years on the field, you could actually say that it actually helped his draft status. I mean, obviously besides what he did. Sure. Right. But, and then, like we were telling the top 10, from Jonathan Allen having a shoulder, Myles Garrett having some things where he didn't show up from time to time, Lattimore's got the hamstring, Hooker's been banged up, Tech McKinley. There's not a ton of clean guys, clean as far as no red flags off the fields, no medical, no character. Jamal Adams, I think, is the one clear-cut, can't miss guy, I think, my personal opinion of the whole draft, But the character stuff is really, really underrated.
Right. Talk about the diluted samples and how NFL teams are really looking hard at this. And the NFL has a no-nonsense policy now. Yeah. You got a diluted sample, they take it as a positive sample, and you're automatically lumped in with other players that will be getting tested on a weekly basis.
Right. And I think it comes back to then the history of the guy, too, because, the guy, of course, you hear a lot of him. I think I heard Foster on the radio and Mike one time, saying, I was pounding water, and of course they're all going to. And then it just comes back to doing your due diligence, what you did the past couple months, talking to the trainers, the coaching staff, looking at his history and his police report. Does he have a marijuana issues in the past? Is this a total random fluke thing? Like this kid's just an all-American great guy, and he, it really was a diluted sample. Yes. So it really comes down to just doing your due diligence and looking at the guy and trusting him or not. It's your call at that point. Right. That's why it's not a perfect science.
Yes. Peppers said to say he was sick.
Yeah, exactly. So there's always something like that. And it just kind of comes down to what your feel is, and if you believe them, and you talk to the coaching staff and the trainers, and you go from there. It's your call, but that's the roll of the dice.
You really have to start checking with coaches, with everybody in the organization. Like with Peppers, he missed the bowl game, and they said he had an injury. Now, do you call and say, do you check after the bowl game? Do you check for drugs after the bowl game? Because they check players that played in the game for drugs after. But do you check players that did not play?
Sure.
So that's a big question. I mean, if they say, you know, we don't check players that are injured, then that's another red flag. Well, was it an injury, or, you know, was it a drug problem, or what?
Do they, and this is a question for you, Ryan, are they looking at the difference between illicit drugs and performance-enhancing drugs, or is it all lumped into one?
I mean, I guess it's, you know, technically it's two different roads definitely going down. Is one, you know, are you trying to cheat the system, or are you? But I feel either one is obviously either one is a huge character flaw. I mean, you're sitting in a position where you're about to go to the NFL Combine, and you're 6 weeks away from, you know, life-changing opportunities. Does it really mean that much to you to smoke marijuana, or does it really mean that much to you get that extra juice and performance enhancing? You know, so they're two different roads, but I think either one of them throws up red flags, regardless. You know,
I mean, they know it's coming.
Right. Well, that's the thing. With millions of dollars on the line,
that's the hard thing to get over. You hear some of these guys' stories of where they came from, and you did all that work for 18 years, you know, and here you are, and you're 6 weeks away, and I mean, it's mind blowing at times.
Yeah,
you know,
I would agree. Yeah. Guys, Loomis said there's 100 to 130 players on their board. He also said that, you know, which I found interesting for a team that needs an instant impact from rookies, and we saw that last year. This is another year with 5 picks in the first 103 that I think you've got to. There is no time to wait on players anymore in the NFL. You've got 3 years now where you're judging a draft. You can hold on to a player for 4 years. That player better be making an impact. No, by year 2, definitely, but yet at least some impact in year 1. He said he wasn't that the team doesn't really look for an instant impact from rookies, and you know, I think he was kind of blowing smoke at the press on that one because, you know, you're drafting a player with a vision, and for that player to come in and immediately fill a role for you, especially if you're talking first, second, maybe into the 3rd round, but definitely your 1st and 2nd round picks.
Right. You know, I was at the press conference, and, you know, the thing is, I think he was protecting himself somewhat, you know. It used to be, you used to hear all the time, it takes 3 years for a guy to really...
Well, before that used to be 5, right?
Yeah,
now it's 3.
Stuff like that. But
that was
now
situations like Joe Montana on the one, and Steve Young as a backup.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's...
You have to perform your first year, at least, you know, somewhat. I mean, you got to show a lot of promise. I mean, because... I mean, the future's now in the NFL. Right. I mean, and you know, it's not 3 years anymore. Now, that happens at times, and sometimes a player will not look too good the first year. And even Cam Jordan, the first year, he played well, but he didn't. You kind of looked at him and said, I don't know, I thought he would be a lot better the first. And then, you know, he really can't. And it's hard for certain positions, I think. Defensive line is one of the harder positions.
Yeah, if you're making
offensive line as well.
Yeah, there's grading scales that certain teams use that say, like, round 1 needs to start. Round 2, you know, borderline starter, great special teamer. Round 3, you know, so... Yeah, I think that if you're taking a guy in round 1 and, you know, especially like top 10 and stuff, you're hoping he comes on in year 1 and he needs to be out there.
He's got to be an instant impact player. I mean, he just does.
Right,
I mean, I don't know how you sugarcoat that. And, you know, I mean, they can sugarcoat all they want out there. But, you know, if you look at what's going on around the league, again, there's a sense of urgency. And, you know, again, the general manager may say that, and Loomis and Bensel and Lausch, as I said earlier on my radio show, that, you know, they may be secure in their jobs, okay, long term, but coaches are not. Yeah. And a coach needs a player that they draft or bring in free agency to make an instant impact. They don't have 5 years to wait on a player, 4 years. If they're not doing it within 2 years, they're ready to move on because they're trying to bring someone in because they want to be, because their life expectancy is maybe 3 to 5 years with a team.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You know, you know, last year the draft was good. If Rankins, you know, wouldn't have tore up, you know, got that leg injury.
Yes.
But I think, you know, they need to do that again. If,
you know, you look at the Rams, like you look at the real quick. You look at the Rams like last year. Not that I agree with Goff's pick, but just in theory, When other people are like, man, they traded a lot away to get it. Well, I thought like Les Snead, for example, and we're looking at like, hey, if we don't hit now, I'm not even going to be here in 3 years. So what's the difference?
Right.
Hey, you gave up your 2020 pick. Well, if it don't hit now, I'm not going to be here in 2020. So I got to go for it.
Yeah, everything again. It's a win now attitude. It has to be because again, if you get longevity, that's a beautiful thing. That means you're winning.
Right.
But and then those picks are not hurting you as bad because you're picking in the late 20s, early 30s. Right. So I mean, but in most cases, you got to win now. We're going to come back. When we come back, we're going to dive into the draft itself. We're going to talk about the strength of the draft. We're going to start talking about some Louisiana players. We're talking about some players that may be on the Saints board. We'll get into all that next here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Ryan Fitzgerald, Senior Bowl scout. Al Dupuy of Draft Day Report are my guest. I'm Eric Asher. We'll be right back.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Amco Fence, locally owned and operated since 1976. Fully licensed and insured and a member of the BBB, Amco serves both residential and commercial customers. If you're looking to repair, replace, or install a fence for security or aesthetic reasons, Amco Fence supplies wooden, metal, chain link, vinyl, and ornamental or automatic gates. Amco aims to satisfy your fencing needs. Amco Fence, 504-468-9559 or AmcoFenceCompany.com.
Welcome back to the draft edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Al Dupuy of Draft Day Report, Ryan Fitzgerald, Senior Bowl scout, are our guests tonight. Guys, Saints, 2 picks in round 1, 11 and 32. Round 2, they have pick 42. Round 3, pick 76 and 103. Right now in round 6, 196, and round 7, 229. I'm hoping they get back into the 4th and 5th rounds. From what I understand from those that watch this very closely, this is one of the deepest drafts we've seen at positions of need for the New Orleans Saints. And I'll take you first, Al. Strength of this year's draft.
The strength. Okay, for the Saints, it's a good because it's a defensive draft, I think. Defensive linemen, cornerbacks especially as well. Derek Barnett or Taco Clauston are the 2 that I have in the bullpen for the Saints with the 11th pick. If Barnett gets picked before 11, which he could, I think Taco is they're different type players. I think Taco, of course, is almost 280 pounds. He's more of a Cam Jordan type. He can rush the passer, but he's not a real pure pass rusher like Barnett is. I don't think Barnett is as athletic as a Cam Jordan, but he's a good football player. He can dip his shoulder, he has moves, and he just rushes the passer very well. So I think that's what the Saints need there. I also had in the bullpen Reuben Foster, but with all of the scuttlebutt now, I guess he may even be way down or off the board. But I think they have to go defense with that 11th pick. And then with 32, if they can get their pass rusher at 11, I think you go for a cornerback at 32. And I really like White, the LSU cornerback, quite a bit. Had a good Senior Bowl until he tweaked an ankle.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Ryan, you see these guys up close and personal from scouting them during the year on their campuses to the Senior Bowl. The depth of this draft, in your opinion?
Yeah, I agree with Al. I mean, the defensive backs, I think, for me, especially with specifically at corner, and I think it's huge for every team. Obviously, especially with like I said earlier, 70% of the time, I think last year, defenses are in nickel. So. You need them. They're all over. You need them. There's matchup nightmares everywhere. So, you look at guys like, from that aspect, like I really, Kevin King, I thought is really good from Washington. For him to, saw him at the combine and everything, for him to be 6'3" and you're in the 4.4s, an extremely intelligent guy. All of his, even his other player, Buda Baker, and all those guys say, he's the mindset of it. So Quincy Wilson out of Florida. Those guys are long, rangy guys. When I was at the Senior Bowl, there was a couple guys like Trevin Durrell and a couple of those guys that you're asking, and I'm like, always like to ask them who's the toughest matchup you had in your career, and both of them instantly are like the Florida boys. They're tough ones. Just the it's such a timing league. You see Rodgers and you see those guys, they're thrown to a spot, and if you can be those Quincy Wilson guys and Kevin King that are long and rangy and just alter those routes just to make that's huge. Even if you don't make the play, even on an interception, just the timing and the flow of that. So. And you're going up against guys like Julio Jones and and Jordy Nelson from Green Bay, 6'3", and can go up and get those guys. It's big at corner to have some length and have some size.
Well, let's stay with that for a second because I want to go to defensive line in a moment. But corner is a need. Give us 4 or 5 corners that you like that fits what the Saints are doing that they may be looking at either 11, 32, or 42.
Yeah, so those two obviously I really like a lot. I'm a big fan of Kevin King, Quincy Wilson. I really, had the pleasure of watching Tre'Davious White here and interviewing him, and obviously his character mindset. I think he's a guy too, like a White that you get so much out of as far as special teams, punt returner. I think as far as character-wise, all that stuff, at the very least, everybody always talks about a guy's ceiling. You also have to talk about a guy's floor. And I feel like a guy is like, a baseball analogy, he's at least a double. He's at least a guy that you can get in there and he's going to play and he's not going to just completely whiff on you. I feel he's in there, he can bump inside if you need to. He's not special teams outside. So those are 3 guys that I really like a lot. And even a nickel guy that maybe at a 42 or something, I think that is a very underrated position. A guy that can come up and hit people and blow up those bubble screens is that Budda Baker from Washington. He's a little bit smaller, obviously, everything. But if you see he's packs a punch, great player, tough guy. Again, character-wise, everything was through the roof. All those Washington guys out there, are really tight-knit unit and really well-spoken.
We know the Saints like the Pac-12 players, too. So give me 5 corners you like in this draft.
Well, the ones he mentioned I like as well.
Okay.
Humphrey from Alabama, he's a really good cover guy. The only knock on him I find is his ball skills are a little weak. But other than that, he can run, he can... and, of course, I mentioned Tre'Davious White. He's one of my favorite. He was doing well at the Senior Bowl, and he tweaked an ankle. But he's versatile, and the Saints need a return game as well. So I think he would do that as well. And I think he's a low first, top second pick, and if he's there at 32, I'd jump on him.
Gary on Conley's, Conley's still good. Like you said earlier, you never, like with the Lyle Collins situation, as far as, you don't want to jump on it too. He's a heck of a player.
Something's going to have to happen by tonight, though.
Right.
I mean, he's either going to be cleared.
Right.
I mean, they're going to say there's nothing to it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the problem with Lyle Collins. Again, even with the Saints being with the close proximity to Baton Rouge and the connections they have with their investigative staff, with state police, Baton Rouge police. Even the Saints didn't have really a feel for what was going on with Collins. Sure. And, of course, when Collins became an unrestricted free agent because he was undrafted, obviously he chose where he was going to go, and Dallas felt like it was the place. Collins going to have something happen to make sure that he'll be cleared. But I want to stay with Ohio State for a moment. Because talk to me about Lattimore.
Another one would be Dory Jackson from USC.
Oh, yeah. I do like Jackson.
He's going to go in that neighborhood at the bottom of round one probably.
Okay, 32 right
or a little
there.
Bit higher. Great athlete. I mean, the guy can return kicks as well. And a good cover corner, fluid, can turn and run.
Yes.
So he's another one. And
talk to me a little bit about Lattimore as well, if you would.
Lattimore is probably the best cornerback in this draft. Right. But like Ryan mentioned before, he's had these chronic hamstring problems. That would, it's a bit of a red flag. If he can find a way to control that, he's a top 10 pick, I think, as far as cornerbacks go.
If you're a left guard that has a hamstring, it's not the end of the world. Right. When you're a corner, it's a problem.
Right. And this has been a habitual thing with him.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's had more than one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now you mentioned Sidney Jones who tore his Achilles. You like him as well.
Who's that now?
Sidney Jones.
Sidney, yeah. Well, he would have been. He would have been in the middle of the first round. Now he's probably a second round guy. So, that's another one. So it's deep in corners. All the ones he mentioned, King and all of those
deep into
guys.
the third and fourth round, if the players that can come in and play.
Yeah, I think so. I think a guy like another guy I was going to mention that late 2 or something like that is Awuzie from Colorado. Is a great player. He's supposed to come to our Senior Bowl as well. Could not make it. Tweaking a couple things and maybe just taking some time, whatever. Make sure he gets healthy before the combine. But those guys, like we were saying that. you're in the top 100, you should be able to come in, and if you're getting picked in the top 100, no matter where your spot is, you should be able to at least come in and at least compete for a starting spot. And then when you are a corner, if you're the nickel for a team, you're pretty much essentially a starter. So if you can find a round 3 guy that can compete, he's probably going to be in the rotation.
Well, talk to me about defensive end, pass rush defensive end or linebackers, and start with Hassan Reddick for me.
Yeah, Riddick. So he's obviously not in my area throughout the course of the year. I'm down here in Louisiana. He's obviously up in Philadelphia, up there in Temple. But at least going in the week of that last month before the Senior Bowl, he's tried to see at least 1 or 2 tapes of every guy. At least that you can say that you know every guy here. And I turned on his tape, and it was just, his from rep 1 to the fourth quarter, the motor is the exact same. Just constant effort. I got a chance to interview him at the Senior Bowl, and you hear his story, and it coincides with how his motor is.
And what is his story?
So his junior year of high school, tears at ACL. The heavy recruiting year, sophomore, junior year of high school, you tear your ACL. Your senior year, you come all the way back for it, tears his other ACL. Nothing. No D3 scholarships, no D2, nothing. So he just said, big bright smile as you're talking to him. He's like, so I just, it's like, all right, gotta grind it out here. Goes to Temple, walk on, doesn't even know what he's going to play. Put him at corner, put him at safety. Long story short, his last junior and senior year, he's coming around the edge. A little bit of a pass rush, a little bit of dropping in coverage. Just an athlete, really, essentially. He's raw. And comes to the Senior Bowl and did outstanding there. Showed that he can turn and run and drop and run. And obviously it showed what for a guy like Deion Jones last year. If you can run in space and you can tackle and you can cover, there's a spot for you. And for him to go as a junior in high school, tearing your ACL, not getting recruited to a top 20 pick is a really cool story.
Right. Some other defensive linemen or outside linebackers, the Saints may be looking at that can pass rush. 11-32 at the late. I say the latest 42.
Yeah, I got a chance to see T.J. Watt work out, and I was the violent, heavy hands, and to be 6'4" and a half and 252 pounds and be able to run like that. And when you sit there in the interview and you talk to him, and he's he sits there and talks about, obviously his brother comes up and he's like, listen, I grew up with my brother my whole life and I know his story, and listen, I'm not trying to downplay him, but he's God gifted, obviously, but worked very, very hard, and I'm willing to put in every single patch. It was a very, very impressive interview. The workout was outstanding. Just the motor, the speed, the size, and they have that heavy hands, and they're accurate. It's not just flaying all over, great balance, and they're effective. When he puts his hands on you, you move. And I really, really like him a lot.
Right. Al, you mentioned Taco Charlton, you mentioned Barnett. Give us a few more players that the Saints may have an interest in. They can come in and make an impact at that rush end outside linebacker position.
Well, Jordan Willis from Kansas State's another one. I think that he's probably going to go down in the bottom of the round, maybe. So say you take a cornerback with 11, if your pass rusher's not there. A guy like Jordan Willis would be there, I think. And, getting back to Reddick just a little bit, I've seen some mock drafts where he goes at 11. Now, I think that's a little bit high because of the fact that, he's a little bit undersized. I know he lined up at defensive end and at linebacker in the Senior Bowl practices. Right. And but I think he's a little light in the as far as a defensive end goes. But it just shows you the versatility of the guy. So I think that McKinney is another one, but he's got the injury. So there's a lot of good pass rushes in this draft. But I think if they don't get the guy they want at 11, they may turn to either a linebacker, a rush linebacker, a smaller guy, or either go for the cornerback. So it's a hard thing you don't know how it's going to fall until you get in there on draft day.
Guys, when you look at this team right now and you look at where they are, one of the positions that they need is that Sproles-Bush type player. There's been a lot of talk. Christian McCaffrey's the vogue pick now. Maybe if the Saints can't find their pass rusher, their corner 11, they may turn to a McCaffrey type. They've got some mock drafts now that have McCaffrey going in the top 10. Al, I'll take you first. We know what this offense does when they have that type of back.
Right.
That back can move that safety, move that linebacker, open up some holes for Drew Brees to operate. It has been missing with this team for a while now. And then you lose a dynamic player like Brandon Cooks. So, again, I got to believe that's got to be on their radar somewhere. There've been some mock drafts that have him going to the Saints at 11. I think that's a little bit high, but he's kind of all over the place now. But he's looked at as at least a top 15 pick right now. Your thoughts?
I love McCaffrey, but I think 11's too high, especially for the Saints. They've got to get defense there, and how would he help this team win? When you pass up a defensive player, even if he has a great year. I mean, I know he'd love to be in Sean Payton's offense, but I think what may happen here, and I agree with you 100%, they need that type of a player. Elijah McGuire, from local type guy from Lafayette, Louisiana Lafayette, probably could last till around the 6th round. And this guy's that type of player, but also has enough size to run between the tackles a little bit. And I think that Lasco, who they took last year, can fill that role a little bit too. I think the problem, now say, if a certain back, if he lasts until 32, maybe you look at him, but I don't think at 11. I don't think
that's not likely. He lasts till 32. Not the way teams are talking about. It
looks like he's going to go in the 20s, McCaffrey. Now, somewhere in there. Right. I have him going number 20 to the Broncos, but I don't think 11 is a little bit too high because of his size, and you worry a little bit about the durability question.
I do agree 11 is a little high. Ryan, what are your thoughts on a McCaffrey or a McCaffrey type for this team? And if you got some names, throw some names out there.
Well,
for
I was
us.
going to say, actually, a little different one that a lot of people think of when they think of that slot guy or that guy that's in space or that mismatch guy. You always think of that Sproles or McCaffrey, that small little guy. But how about a guy that also is a mismatch guy that's a hybrid, is a guy, I'm not saying necessarily in round 1 or anything, but maybe on the round 2 and on the edge. A little bit of a luxury pick, but also causes mismatch is Evan Ingram from Ole Miss. I watched 122 reps of him before the Senior Bowl, 122 snaps. Only put his hand down in the dirt 3 times. Right. So he's classified as a tight end, and then you watch him at the Senior Bowl, 6'3", and can run, and great route runner. He's kind of more of a wide receiver, but also could be in that H-back. And when he does have to block, he can pick it up. And even if you're Darren Sproles, even if you're McCaffrey, there's going to be times you're going to have to step in there and block, whether it is picking up the rush. So he might be a guy, and the Saints obviously have a lot of success with tight ends going down the middle and everything. He could cause some mismatch. It's about the mismatch, whether it be a 5'8" guy or a 5'9" guy, or it be a 6'3" guy on a linebacker that can't run that well. It's about mismatch. So whether it be Ingram and he's in that H-back or in that slot, that's all he did. A lot of what he did at Ole Miss is that stand up in the slot, and kind of like how the Broncos used Julius Thomas a couple years back when Adam Gase was the head coordinator.
Quarterback has been mentioned as a possibility for the Saints. I'm one that believes that this is not the year for a quarterback, that you need defensive help. If you had to go offense, it would be that satellite-type player, maybe a swing guard, tackle center, a guy that can play along the offensive line like a Ethan Posick type. But talk about the quarterbacks, as always, tonight, teams are falling in love with quarterbacks. And the best thing that can happen to the Saints is there is a push to be able to get in front of Cleveland at 12 and start trying to be able to grab these quarterbacks, maybe going out and going after some of these offensive players and pushing these defenders back. Al, I'll take you first. Who are your top quarterbacks in this draft, and do you think there'll be some movement to try to move up to get these guys in the top 10?
There's been a lot of talk about Cleveland. They have to get a quarterback. They're talking about they're going to move up from 12, but to me, I don't rate a quarterback in this draft in the top 10. But that's not to say one or even maybe two will end up going in the top 10. Trubinsky is the guy they've been mentioning the most. He's probably the most accurate thrower in this draft, but I rate Watson from Clemson as number 1. And, you can look at a lot of things. He's not as accurate, I agree, but he's a winner, okay? And he's got more skins on the wall. Trubinsky's played in 13 games, and I mean, that scares me a little bit. Okay, he's going to be a good quarterback when. It won't be this year. I don't think you can start him this year. And so do you take a guy like that in the top 10? I think Watson, he made a believer out of me in that championship game. You know, he didn't look good in the first half, but the guy, when the game's on the line, he made clutch throws and ended up winning the ball game. And because the guy's he's just a winner, a good football player. Now, he is erratic. He'll throw a lot of picks. He'll throw some crazy balls. But, you know, not as accurate maybe, but just a really good football player and a good quarterback. And, you know, the guy that might surprise, and I think the Saints, I have them going with the 103rd pick, that Nate Peterman from Pittsburgh. And I know they interviewed him a lot at the Senior Bowl. Yeah. And, you know, the guy is, he just a good football player. He reminds you a little bit of a young Drew Brees in a way, you know. I'm not saying he's in that, that, you know, now, but down the road. He manages the game. He's smart. He's got a good enough arm. And he's not as flashy maybe as some of these other guys, but I think the Saints have some interest in him.
Right. Your thoughts, first of all, on teams moving into the top 10 to try to get quarterbacks. Do you anticipate that tonight? And are there players worth that in the top 10? You know, or is this typical NFL general managers, personnel directors coveting a quarterback? I need a quarterback. Right. I got to go get one.
Right. I don't think that's a top 10 grade at all. I don't think so. I think that this time of year, you know, you kind of create players, and you find ways to try to convince yourself that he's good. And it's just like I don't get that sometimes when, like you just said, if you can go get a, you know, I have no problem drafting a quarterback every year, but you don't have to go back into round 1 or move up. Why can't you get a Peterman in round 2 or 3 and develop him? Or why can't, you know, unless he's a clear cut and he's there and you really like him a lot, but. I could even go as far as say his entire round 1. I don't really see it. I don't think there's a guy that's got a clear cut round 1 grade overall. I really think it's kind of be more of a desperation reach, and like, you know, it's a quarterback driven league. Obviously, everybody knows that. It's been beaten to death on that. You got to get your guy, but I certainly wouldn't mortgage the farm for anybody. You know.
Talk to me about when teams are evaluating a player, in your opinion. What is the best telltale sign of whether that player will make it in the NFL? Is it competition and what they've done on the field? And again, when I say competition, are they playing well against top teams who have NFL talent or future NFL talent? Or is it measurables? The guy can run, he's big, you know, he looks good in, in shorts and a T-shirt. When you're doing this as a scout, what are you looking for?
Well, to touch on the first one, you definitely don't, you know, judge the player by necessarily his school. At least I don't, and that's how I've been, you know, Phil kind of taught myself and everything. Is you know, there's small school guys out there all the time. There's stories like Hassan Reddick, where a kid got hurt in high school and there's a reason why he didn't get recruited. You know, same thing with Carson Wentz last year. There's also what Phil calls a lot of time the fog of confusion. You take a guy like D. Milner. You know, he's sitting there. He never had to guard a 3-way go route in his entire Alabama career because he had a great Alabama defense around him. And he plays in week 1 against Michigan a couple years back, and he has a pick 6, and Alabama and the band, and they're 12-0, and he looks really good. And by year 3, he's not even starting. He's borderline cut. So I would evaluate the player. I wouldn't worry about if he goes to Southeastern like Harlan Miller did, or if he goes to Alabama like D. Milner did. I would evaluate the player, and that's what I would look at, you know. And you see it at the Senior Bowl every time. That's what's really good about the Senior Bowl. Not that I'm just pushing the Senior Bowl, but
we have the Senior Bowl.
of course. But you know, it's like, you know, last year Harlan Miller gets matched up against Sterling Shepard, first rep of the first practice. He wouldn't have had that necessarily all the time, and you get to see. There's your perfect example. Like, well, has he got 10 picks because he's playing, you know, in a smaller division at a smaller school? Or is he a really good player? And you can see if he can hang. And then there's also guys that get exposed. You know, there's guys that get exposed that, like, you know, a good coach that's good at, like, well, I'll keep him over there. I won't put him in the open side field. I'll keep him in the boundary where he's always got a safety over the top. And he's always got extra help. And you can kind of hide a guy. And, you know, so there's when you're doing one-on-one drills at the Senior Bowl and it's the whole field behind you and it's just you, the receiver, and the quarterback, not a lot of places to hide.
Yes.
So you're going to find out what, you know, where you stand, you know. So I believe you evaluate the player, you scout the player.
Right. What about Kareem Hunt?
Exactly, Toledo.
The Senior Bowl.
Right.
I think he was he had 118 yards rushing and you know, in the game, and had a really good week of practice from Toledo, small school. 2 of the top players, Forrest Lamp from Western Kentucky, Corey Davis, a wide receiver, Western Michigan, small schools. You know, so
there's
a lot
usually
of
a
good
story
small
behind
schools.
that too, of what happened. You know, like Carson Wentz
Yeah,
breaking his wrist his junior year in high school, so you know he's get recruited. You know, so there's usually a reason.
Al, what's your thoughts on measurables or competition and game tape?
I think the most overrated thing when it comes to quarterbacks is you hear a lot of talk about arm strength. You know, that first thing that, man, this guy's got a great arm. He can throw the ball 60 yards. Kneeling down, you know. But to me, that's one of the most overrated. No, it's great to have a good arm. If you can throw the deep out and put the ball where it's supposed to go, you got enough arm strength to make all the throws that you need to make in the NFL. But I think managing the game, I mean, look at Drew Brees. He's definitely not one of the strongest arm quarterbacks in this league, but the guy's just, you know, a game manager, knows where to go with the football. He puts it to a spot. And I mean, he's just been a winner his whole career. So I think that's the most overrated thing when it comes to quarterbacks. I don't know if Ryan agrees, but arm strength, I mean,
or when you hear
it's
someone
good
say,
to have, but you don't judge a quarterback because a guy can throw the ball, you know, with great velocity. And it's good to say, you know, he can really spin it and all that.
I was just going to say, I don't know what that means. You know, I think that, you know, hey, you can really spin it. You know, he's a game manager that can spin it. I don't know.
That doesn't make you a good quarterback.
Right. Guys, we only got about 3 minutes left. Some Louisiana players you think that may be drafted?
Well, of course, the LSU guys, you know, Barnett, Adams, you mentioned before. You know, so Posick, I think, is going to be a pretty good player. A guy at the Senior Bowl that may have helped himself is Gotcha, I think, you know, the defensive tackle. So, you know, I think I mentioned the guy, the running back, McGuire. Right. From, you know, there's another guy, Carlos Henderson from Louisiana Tech, who's a good receiver.
How about the receiver from Grambling?
Oh, great. Yeah, I had a chance to really like him.
Now, wasn't he not invited at first?
No, he was right. He was our kind of a reserve. I went up, you know, I went up and saw him against Mississippi Valley State, you know, and he's Grambling. He did, you know, Mississippi Valley State's 0-10, so there was a perfect example of evaluating. And he was one of those guys that from the second the ball was snapped, he's putting his hands up like Randy Moss. He's open, you know, and you know, Baton Rouge kid, and he was a reserve for us and everything. That couple of receivers went down. He came to the Senior Bowl and did outstanding. And even after he did outstanding, you know, going against a White, Travis White and those guys, still didn't get invited to the combine. And right at his pro day, I went to Louisiana Tech and was in the 4.3, 4.4s. Duke Riley from LSU is an outstanding player, and even right down the road here, a great motor, a great character kid is Tanzel Smart from Tulane. Is an awesome guy. So those guys, him and those guys, you know, 6th, 7th round guys, those guys, can, you know, like a Chad Williams and a Tanzel Smart that can make it in the back end. Those are great players. And you see Duke Riley and you see what Deion Jones did at Atlanta. If you can run and you can play special,
not as well as
not as well as it for sure.
But he's a good player.
But if you can tackle and you can run and you can play
too,
special teams,
you mentioned Smart. They had some one-on-ones with Smart going against the LSU guy.
Posick,
that was interesting.
Yeah, he got under his skin. You know, he's like, man, and Posick said in there, he was like, got nothing wrong with him. He's like, man, he just keeps on coming.
But it was fun to watch.
just doesn't quit. He's a great character guy. Of the 115 guys we had, he was by far one of the best character guys we had.
We've got about 30 seconds. Really strong draft this year?
Yeah, I think so, and it's a good defensive draft. Should help the Saints. You just got to do it right.
Ton of starters out there, guys that you can get in on Friday in round 2 and round 3 that I think are going to play in the league for a long time.
Sounds good. Ryan Fitzgerald, Senior Bowl scout, Al Dupuy of Draft Day Report. Thanks so much for being with us tonight on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Thank you.
It ought to be a great draft. Looking forward to it, man. And of course, the draft's coming up right after this program tonight. I want to thank our guests, Al Dupuy and Ryan Fitzgerald. Also, want to thank the WLAE production staff as well. But first, remember, you can check me out on the radio, 990 AM WGSO. That's 11 to 1 weekdays. That you can check us out on the TuneIn Radio app as well. And you can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. Also, the Inside New Orleans Sports, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLE at 10 p.m. Also on Pelican Sports on Friday night at 9 p.m. And we're now on Cox 130, so on Thursdays at 10 o'clock and Saturday morning at 2 a.m. If you want to catch us on Cox 130, you can do that as well. Again, special thanks to the WLE production staff. They do a fantastic job here, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Naila Jones, Kenny Juneau, and my director, William Hill. Thanks so much for watching. Next week, we'll break down the draft. We'll see all the players that the Saints have brought in. And we'll do that for you next Thursday night right here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks for watching. Have a fantastic weekend. My name is Eric Asher. See you later.
New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.
And also up here, this has to be much brighter.